It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Republicans not happy. Not happy. Biden, the Biden folks cracking down on child labor violations. Now understand, red states across the country loosening child labor protections because, hey, we need cheap labor, man. We need to get those kids back to work. Well, the Department of Labor on Monday just announced a $650,000 civil penalty against this Fayette Janitorial Services LLC. Now, what these folks were doing, look, you need cheap labor somewhere. You need to get that cheap labor in there because, well, you got contracts to make. Because what happens in this country is you don't actually work for the company that you work for. You work for a third-party logistics company. So that big company like Purdue Farms, they can have plausible deniability. We have a zero tolerance for child labor violations. But the company that we hire to do our work, well, that's their problem, right? So this is what this is. You've got this Fayette company working for these big firms, Purdue Farms, Seaboard, Triumph Foods. And what they found is they've used a bunch of kids to do some pretty dangerous work. Now, understand, in the meatpacking industry, you cannot be younger than 18 years old to work in any of the processing plants because it's dangerous. Lots of sharp stuff, lots of things that could chop off fingers and toes and arms and legs and all of that stuff. So $650,000, it seems like a lot, not much. If anything, really. A slap on the wrist at best. But understand, these kids are working with head splitters and jaw pullers and meat bandsaws. You know, good fun things for children. In fact, a 14-year-old was severely injured while cleaning one of the machines. They call it a drumstick packing line belt. Cleaning the belt, not good at a plant in Virginia. Now, what I love about this is the spokesperson for the company says, you know, we have a zero tolerance policy except in these, well, I think they said it was 14, 15 cases. And you go, how did we get here? Well, simple. The sad reality is, look, child labor violations have jumped 88% since 2019. Because look, corporate America needs their cheap fix. And what better way to do that? Now, understand, I doubt any of these kids were, well, your children. They were probably those children. The ones nobody seems to really, poor kids, you know what I mean? The ones nobody really seems to care much about, and good on the Biden folks for doing this. But here's the thing. This isn't new. This is something that goes back to the Regan years, when they were cutting school lunch programs and they were cutting funding for education. They were making mom and dad compete with the kids. Look, when I was a kid, I had two paper routes, the morning and the evening. For one of the first jobs I ever lost. The Cleveland Press went out of business. I lost my paper route. Kids used to do that stuff. Kids used to cut grass for neighbors. Kids used to do a lot of things to learn a little work, little how to be entrepreneurial, how to go out and hustle a little bit. Now mom and dad got to take those jobs. The person who delivers newspapers in my neighborhood is a 50-year-old guy because he needs the money. Because of the Reagan era, we've deindustrialized. Because of corporate America pushing back in really incredible ways, you can no longer live on one income in this country. It used to be, and I know, shocker of shockers, one income, one breadwinner, working 40 hours a week could support a family and do it pretty well. But then again, we had 35% union density in this country, not 6%. We had strong, vibrant labor movement. We had strong, progressive tax code to ensure that the wealthy didn't get too far away from the rest of us. We are now in the worst most unequal time in the history of this country, and yet people are going, it's those people down below me who are the problem. Understand, I get it. I see all over social media about, I can't buy groceries. How does anyone buy groceries anymore? It's tough. And if you are buying groceries and you are getting by, you're probably working 3 jobs because 1 doesn't cut it and 2 hasn't for a while. Now you need 3. Now you need to get the kids, get them out of school, get them into the workplace. And this is what's frustrating to me. There should be a massive outcry and outrage over what Republicans have done. This is Reagan era forward. This is, let's destroy that social safety net. Let's destroy that New Deal era policy that created the most prosperous working class in the history of humanity. And what did we do? We decided, no, we don't want education. We don't want roads and bridges. We don't want health care. We don't want school lunch programs. We don't want kids not having to work in slaughterhouses. We don't want those things that the 20th century brought us. No. We want 19th century inequality. We want 19th century desperation. And this is what the Republicans have brought us. And they've told us. This is the thing that gets me. And they've done it by, stealing. From you, from me, from working people, wages that used to go in your pocket that are now being hoarded at the top. Because they're the smart ones, we're told. We've got to give them all the money. It's really masterful what they've gotten away with. Because, look, this country, for the working class, has been in decline for the last 50 years. For the last 50 years. The high point of the American economy for working people was 1973. We have been on a steady decline ever since. Standard of living has gone down. Opportunities have gone down. Class mobility has gone down. All of those things that was the American dream, the great American experiment, have been robbed. And the question comes back to, when do we say no more? When do we fight back and go, hey, we want good paying jobs so that we can spend more time with our families. We want health security so that if a kid gets sick or we get sick, we don't go broke. Hey, we want some retirement security. But they stole all of that, man. They've taken all of it away. Every bit of it. And why? So we can have the richest people in the world. Aren't you proud of that? And now we've got kids back working in slaughterhouses. Aren't you proud? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. And take a quick break. Right back with Greg Regan. Back after this.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, we're ticking down to the final time, to the final minutes to get something done in Congress. And this, I don't know about you, but this is no way to run a lemonade stand, let alone the most powerful nation on the planet, with millions of people who need help and need funding and need things to get done. It's quite amazing to me. But the reality is the FAA reauthorization bill needs to be reauthorized by Friday. I'm here to share some thoughts on, what happens if it doesn't? I've asked our good friend Greg Regan to come talk with us. Greg is the president of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So let's start with this. Friday, the deadline. Why can't we get this stuff done before deadlines? Why, or has it always been this way?
It's been this way as long as my career has lasted. I mean, I'm thinking back to the 2012 bill. We started working on that in 2007, I think, and it finally got done in 2012. I mean, I think Congress loves nothing more than walking right up to the edge of the cliff and leaning over and just daring someone to pull them back.
And why is this separate from the rest of the budget process? This is what I don't get. How come we just can't get the work done?
Yeah, this is an authorization bill. I mean, we're talking about safety policies in the FAA reauthorization. It's not about funding the FAA. It's not about funding air traffic control, for example. I mean, one of the important parts of this bill, and the reason why we needed to be passed by the end of the week, is it really reforms the way we are going to be training and hiring air traffic controllers, so we can get more people into the system. And that's true also for FAA safety inspectors. But other aspects of the bill that are so important. I mean, this is a labor bill. This is a union bill more than almost anything else. We've got cabin air quality issues to make sure the air people are breathing is safe when they're on board an aircraft. We've got really good language on foreign repair stations so that we have better oversight of the work being done on our aircraft. We don't have, thankfully, any major changes to pilot retirement age or to pilot training standards. But there's a lot of, and there's protections for customer service agents. I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff in here that is all geared towards making sure the system is safer, remains the safest in the world, and will hopefully continue to modernize.
Yeah. Now, I read something somewhere that we're like 3,000 air traffic controllers short. Is that true?
Well, it depends on how you want to classify it. We do have a shortage right now. The bigger problem, in my view, is that we have so many that are eligible to retire now or within the next 5 years. So that's why I think the important part of this bill is about how it's going to increase that pipeline and make sure we get more people trained. There's a narrow window for when you can make that choice to become an air traffic controller. You can't start the training process after age 30. So, it's not like, someone decides to make a career change when they're 40 years old, they'll just go become an air traffic controller. And it's a long, and it should be, and it's an arduous training process. So I think setting the hiring standards and setting the goals that this bill does is going to make a really big improvement, maybe not tomorrow, but it will make a really big improvement 5, 10, 15 years from now, and hopefully get us on firmer footing.
Well, that's important too. But I was reading that they're like 3,000 short, and they're trying to pull people in. And the current air traffic controllers are basically overworked. They're working like, from what this article said, working like 6 days a week to fill the void of these shortages. And because we've had some near miss things, there have been some stuff that makes you wonder if fatigue's not a problem. And I started thinking about isn't this the kind of stuff they were talking about when the Patco people went on strike that we still haven't completely fixed?
They definitely, fatigue is an issue. The mandatory overtime is an issue. I think the hours is an issue, and it's something that's only going to be solved with sensible hiring targets and hiring policies. And we're not going to, let's be honest, every air traffic controller I know, and I know a lot of them, they loved their job. They love or loved, whether they're retired now, they love it. It's a great job, and they're going to have a good living and good retirement and good benefits. But the problem is, if you're gonna make it take away some of those aspects, including the fact that you might have to work 6 days a week for God knows how long, that makes it less appealing. And these are critical safety professionals who are so integral to our system, and we cannot take that for granted. That's why this bill, frankly, is so important to get across the finish line, because for once we're going to start having more sensible targets and more sensible hiring policies. No,
that's a good thing, But the thing that gets me is, we've seen some stories about near misses, some things that have happened on the ground. And look, I know things happen. I'm not oblivious to the fact that sometimes things just work out a certain way. But a lot of the reporting that I've seen, and there's not a lot of this on the FAA. This is not a big sexy bill from what the mainstream thinks. But some of those stories, they grab people's attention when there is a near miss or when a door flies off or something.
Yeah, and look, I think there is always going to be a little bit of I think people's attention to the potential for aircraft disaster is always higher. I would frankly point to our safety rates on our roads as a much bigger actual threat to most Americans' well-being. But aviation is the safest way to travel. It truly is. And I'm on an airplane probably once every week and a half. And I always feel very comfortable with it because of the people that we have there, because of the standards that we put in place in aviation, both for the pilots, for the flight attendants, for the ramp workers, for the air traffic controllers, for the safety inspectors. But it doesn't mean that we can't do better. And I think that that's what this bill for us is always about, moving it a little bit forward. So making sure that we have better protections for workers, protecting people from assaults in the airports, for example, making sure that we do not erode away any of the safety, the training standards that we have developed over the years that have proven to be effective. And then, of course, we also look at the aircraft manufacturing aspect of it. That is an important part of all of this. So, there's a reason why I think this bill in particular, out of all the ones that I work on every 4 or 5 years, the FAA reauthorization is always one. There's always an extension or two, but for the most part, we end up with a bipartisan bill because the union voices that go in, whether you're a pilot, air traffic controller, flight attendant, can come in with really sound safety-based arguments about why policy needs to be changed. And as a result, we get really firm bipartisan consensus on some of these important issues. And I don't think it's an accident that, every member of Congress flies at least once a week.
Some like Ted Cruz to Cancun, because I happen to see him talking about, and in a positive way, about this reauthorization bill, and he was talking about a lot of technology. The question that I have in this is, how much are we moving, perhaps to move towards technological advancements that might eventually replace these air traffic controllers, where the mindset might be, hey, we don't need to hire new people, we can just use technology.
For now, I don't think we're at risk of that in aviation. It's certainly something we're aware of because it happens all over the world in a lot of different industries, that we can find this new piece of technology. It means we don't have to pay for one more person's health insurance, one more person's salary. But in aviation, I think, this is an industry where we've done a pretty good job of making sure that as new technology is introduced, the mindset is that we're using it in a way that will enhance, for example, the pilot's ability to do their job, or the air traffic controller's ability to do their job effectively. When you think about some of the new technology on any modern aircraft and things like autopilot, stuff like that, they are viewed and integrated in a way that is, how are we going to make sure the pilot will continue to be able to do the best job they can? The pilots can do the best job they can to take off and land safely. And I think that a lot of other industries could learn a lesson from that, frankly, because railroads are one example where every time they get a new piece of technology, they turn around and say, okay, this is a great way to cut headcount. And, I think aviation has been, in many ways, a good example about how we can integrate technology and empower workers to do their jobs more effectively. And we're going to continue to make sure that that's the case no matter what happens down the road, whatever is introduced. Simply
by giving them better tools. It makes sense.
Exactly. And if you're truly concerned about safety, that needs to be your number one question. How can we help this person do their job better?
Is there a lot of that in this bill? I think when people hear these, about these big bills, they don't quite know what's in it. This is a big piece of legislation, right?
Yeah, it is. There is a lot of technology stuff, but a lot of it is also based on studies. So, for the most part in aviation, you're not going to take a plunge before it's been well studied and the benefits or the costs are well documented. And it's always based on safety. And I think that's because people are so focused that I think there is a fear of flying 30,000 feet in the air that a lot of Americans have, which, there is always, if you're even thinking about eroding away at a safety standard, then people are going to go nuts.
Yeah. I don't personally fly well. In the plane, I'm okay. But you drop me out of the plane, I'm going to drop like a rock.
Well, look, I don't think you have to worry about that. It is genuinely the safest way to fly. My friend Jennifer Hamady at the NTSB will tell you that 50 times over. The bigger threat is when you're in your car driving home from work or to the airport.
As a truck driver, I know that to be true. I often refer to planes as trucks with wings, because basically the workers in there are just like truck drivers, the pilots, the flight attendants, the same kind of idea. So in this reauthorization bill, we are talking about the pilots and the flight attendants and the ground crew and all the people who go into this. It's about their conditions. Is that what I'm getting?
It's a huge part of it, yeah. I mean, there are other things. We're also looking at modernizing our air traffic control system. I mean, Next Gen is something that we've been working on for quite a while to try to make sure that we have all of the best technology to make sure that air traffic control is as efficient and as safe as possible. But for us, we look at a lot of other aspects. One of the most important parts of this bill from a labor perspective has to do with the heavy maintenance facilities for large body aircraft. I don't think a lot of people realize necessarily how much of the heavy maintenance work on these aircrafts, domestic aircrafts, U.S.-owned aircrafts, are being done in foreign countries.
Ethiopia, if I remember right.
Yeah, and oftentimes with very little oversight from the FAA or from a lot of U.S. government agencies. And so this bill would go a long way towards actually helping to change that and making sure that there is more oversight of these stations. And I've dealt with this for my entire career, and a lot of people, the argument is always, oh, well, those are sovereign countries. We can't impose our laws upon them. And my argument to them is always, sure, we can't impose our laws upon Ethiopia or whatever country it may be. But what we can do is we don't have to give them an FAA certification, so they have to so they can allow to do our work.
Yeah.
So let's just, let's make sure. I think it's a pretty fair argument. If you want to work on U.S. aircraft that are going to fly people in United States airspace, then you should meet certain standards. And this bill makes a really big push towards having some equity between those two. And hopefully there's not as much of an incentive to outsource that work and do it overseas if they actually have to follow the same rules as they do here.
Now, I got to tell you, I want it done here. There's just something about that. I go, if it's flying here, it should be done here. If it's flying in Ethiopia, it should be done there. Maybe I'm just old.
Well, look, there's always the reason why we've allowed it in the first place has to do with the growth of international travel. Like there should be a time when you need to be able to have your aircraft worked on in a foreign country. And, if you fly to Africa and you realize there's an issue with the gauge or whatever, you need to be able to, or there's the fuel pump, you need to be able to get that fixed there.
Clearly.
But sometimes, and increasingly so, a lot of these airlines are flying empty aircraft to foreign countries to do all their real heavy work because it's that much cheaper, because they're not paying people enough. There's not the same oversight and all that stuff. And that's what we're trying to fix here.
No, that's good. How much of this bill will have anything to do with the trouble that Boeing's having? I'm not sure if you've been following the Boeing story, but there's some interesting stories coming out of South Carolina where maybe they didn't do certain inspections, maybe they were pencil whipping things through. Anything in this about that?
Not really, no. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we're talking about a manufacturing, the overall aircraft manufacturing oversight issue. And if you recall, this is not the first recent problem that Boeing's had. The 737 MAX issue that caused a couple of planes or a few planes to go down. There was a major piece of aircraft certification reform legislation that was done right in the wake of all of those crashes. I think that was 2019, thereabouts. A lot of that either hasn't been fully implemented or we haven't seen what the actual results of those reforms are going to be. So I think it would be slightly I never loved the idea of knee-jerk legislating. I don't think that yields the best results. And, we did pass legislation that was union endorsed. It was a good piece of legislation. I think we have to see sort of what the remaining holes are before we actually have the idea about what further needs to be done. And I do think there will be something, maybe not this year, but I do think next year it's likely that we'll see this conversation renewed about what else needs to be done in aircraft certification.
No, that's smart. Last question I've got for you. If all this stuff's in there and I don't find anything objectionable, why is it not done?
That's an FAA bill. There's all sorts of reasons. I mean, there are, all right, I'll take this in two tranches. One, this was done in a somewhat unorthodox way where this bill has not been considered by the full Senate until now. So there's members of that are not part of the Senate Commerce Committee that are using this as they're like, I want my chance to amend this bill. I want my say. And there are other issues like slots at Regan National Airport. There's the retirement age issue where people are continuing to push on this stuff. That if any one of those things were included, it could, potentially sink the whole bill. But at the same time, there are certain senators who really care about it. So they're working through those issues right now. The other side of, why this hasn't been done yet is, let's be realistic. This is probably the last train leaving the station before the election season in terms of real legislating, big legislation. So there's a whole question about, are we going to do non-germane amendments, meaning anything that is not aviation related? Is this our chance to do some housekeeping in Congress? Can we take care of whatever random issue that is non-controversial that needs to get done, but we haven't gotten done yet? And those are the types of things they're working out right now. The reason why it hadn't gotten done up until this point is really they need to get the bill unified between the House and the Senate first, and they're there now. Now it's all the other stuff that they're figuring out. But I think we're going to I think it's going to get done.
Under the wire. We're going to make it under the wire. But yep. I want to go back to something you said a second ago. Slots at an airport?
Yeah. So
who put this forth? I got to know who put this forth.
So this is a fight every time. Let's be honest. It's about the DCA, the Reagan National Airport. When it was started, it was a military airport. Then they started doing commercial flights. In order to reduce noise in that area, they limited it to regional aircraft. And then they started adding more and more slots to go outside the quote unquote perimeter for like the miles around. And every year people want flights into the airport that's closest to the Capitol. Okay. That's it.
No, that makes sense. I'm thinking slot machines.
Oh, no. We're talking about, slots for aircraft, like more flights that can go longer distances into that specific airport.
Got it.
That issue has it's always debated every 5 years, 4 years when this comes up. It's always an issue.
Now that makes sense, which is why smart guys like you are working on this, helping it get through. Because my mind goes, why would you want slot machines? Oh, Vegas has them. It's miserable there. Why would I do that in D.C.?
Atlantic City too.
Makes sense. But Greg, I appreciate you taking some time for us. As always, great stuff, my friend.
All right, thank you.
Greg Regan, president of the Transportation Trades Department of AFL-CIO. Make sure you check out their website, ttd.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Back after this.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you, you're done. Politically it's over when Fox News starts asking real questions. I don't know if you saw it, but Stuart Varney, whom I'm not a fan of by any stretch of the imagination, host of the Fox Business Show, had South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem on. Yeah, her again. Still trying to pimp the book, and I give her credit. She's trying. And Varney asked her if she had ever talked to Trump about killing her 14-month-old puppy, and she lost her mind. She said, "This interview's ridiculous, which you are doing right now. So you need to stop," she said. It is okay, she said. It is. Let's talk about some real topics that Americans care about. Turns out, Americans care if you shoot a puppy in the face. Who would have known? Who would have known? Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
Any thoughts on the puppy shooter?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it made interesting radio for me. The shows that I called, I knew you would know this, but the other shows that I did, the hosts, I would throw out this question. I said, now, what did it do to Mitt Romney's career? And they're like, what are you talking about?
Don't roof rack me, bro.
Right. There was a dog on the roof. I won't go through all the details.
Poor Seamus.
dog diarrhea occurred. It was on the roof for 12 hours. He stopped, blah, blah, blah. And they're like jaw dropping. You got to be kidding me. I said, no. Now, but Mitt didn't shoot the dog. All right. She shot the dog. There's the other thing. I've had dogs, my kids, I've had so many dogs. I can't name all of them. Okay. When one of them became a problem, or if it tried to bite somebody, or, if it got sick, we went to a vet and they humanely put it down, all right, with the shot. That's what people normally do. What amazed me, Rick, was her ability to think by putting this in the book. She showed, I'm tough. Look at me. I shot my puppy. You got to vote for me. I'm seriously, that's where her mind went. The Kim Jong-un thing is just completely bizarre. Just
stupid. And the thing is, I saw another interview where the woman kept asking her, going, look, right. You read the book. You did the reading. You did the audio book. It's your voice. You read it. We know you read it. We heard you read it. Why didn't you stop right then and go, wait a minute, this isn't right?
Right. Yeah, she can't explain it.
It's crazy.
But that's the other thing. Why would you put something like Kim Jong-un, of all things, in a book? You meet famous people, and they may not recall, for example, that they met you, but where you met them and what the circumstances are. Kim Jong-un, you'd remember just for his haircut alone. All right, that's a keeper.
I love that on the internet they put her next to George Santos. Maybe that's who she thought Kim Jong-un was. I don't know, but it just goes to show. That they have ghostwriters who do all this stuff, and it really isn't about the content. It's about just throwing stuff against the wall, and they get away with it. Turns out Americans do care about shooting puppies. Rare that we across party lines care about something, but this is the bridge too far.
That was it. When I cringed when I thought, why did she go do that? You take, the other thing is you can take it to shelters where you say, well, the dog misbehaves, it doesn't hunt well, or it tried to bite somebody. Then they make this decision too. Yeah. Is this a dog that it can be, rehabilitated, can be adopted or not? You don't just take it out and shoot it.
Yeah, but someone did tell me that maybe this was her ploy to get the gig at the NRA. Maybe this is that stepping stone.
Yeah, maybe.
You never know. Hey, I think we talked about this a long time ago, and it's really not surprising. I think everyone knew it was coming, but the court case, the Trump court case, indefinitely suspended by the woman down there in Florida.
Right. You have several things. You have that leaving Smith's case, which is now being punted eventually by the Supreme Court down, which then the lower courts make decisions on what's immunity or not. And that's almost on a item by item, which forces the Justice Department to basically go back and recarve, quote, the indictment. All right. That's a very potential scenario. Now, if that happens, we know that court case is obviously shot till, using the Governor Noem expression, but it's shot till after the election. Leaving the Fannie Willis case, I won't even go there. That one's got a problem. Leaving the Stormy Daniels case. So there's basically, right now one case that's obviously going to be decided before, and you can. I watched, the testimony, the reaction, et cetera. The judge's statements in themselves where, Trump's attorneys didn't object enough. The judge kind of pointed that out. You can see, if not motions continuing of mistrial, you can see appeal in big letters after this trial,
sure.
No matter how it comes out.
Yeah, and the judge declined to declare a mistrial. So this is going to continue to go forward. And you're right. The other part of this is, look, maybe on appeal. So the hope and the dream of some that Trump may end up in jail, which I don't think is ever going to happen. But there is, I guess, some threat of potentially because of him not being able to shut up. What is this, his 10th violation of the gag order?
Right, and the $1,000 fine each. I want to throw something out here, and I made some of my friends' heads explode by saying this, but I'll say it. If I put myself in Biden's shoes, all right. First of all, if this judge looks at contempt via the jail process, which they've hinted at, versus the monetary process, which isn't working, it's getting $1,000 fines. Maybe the judge needs to up it to 10K each time. I don't know. But I think in my mind, very clearly, if he jails Trump, it's done. And what I mean by that, Trump, not haters, but people who dislike Trump, and they may not be sold on Biden, but they don't like him. The whole scenario of, it'd be interesting. A lot of memes, a lot of radio show stuff we could talk about, but the whole jailing and the jumpsuit and the Secret Service having to go into the jail and all the mechanics, it would be a martyr kingdom for Trump.
Yeah,
he would turn into a martyr.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. And you got Fox News kind of hoping for this. What was that idiot I can't stand? What's his name? Jesse Waters. So he'll come out and he'll be all prison buff. I'm going, what? But they're trying to prepare the audience for Trump going to jail. I don't think it's going to happen. I seriously don't. But on any level, he's never going to spend a day behind bars. I just don't see that happening.
Here's my Biden theory. Hear me out for 1 second before you laugh too hard. If the outside chance happens that Trump is put in jail, wonder if President Biden came out and said, look, I personally think he's guilty, and I think this, and I think that, but no, he needs to not be in jail. I'm just throwing that out there. What reaction would be? What would happen?
Yeah. Or, Biden comes out and just says, you know what, I'm preemptively pardoning him of everything on the federal level. We're just going to move on. Let's deal with this in the election. I don't know how he would react.
I was just looking at the Stormy Daniels case, but you make a very other interesting point.
Yeah, this we'll see. It'll be, even if he is found guilty, it's going to be years of appeals and all kinds of legal maneuvering. I think this is the only case that's going to get a decision before the election, because clearly the documents case is delayed indefinitely. As you pointed out, the thing in Georgia is a mess. This is going to be it.
Okay. Georgia had, to me, and I said this from day one, Georgia was the toughest case for Trump, especially Georgia law. The governor can't pardon. You have to do mandatory 5 years before it's considered, et cetera. Georgia tended to be the most delicate case, and we all know what happened there. And now it's, going to be retooled, and that's the end of that before the election.
Yeah. Well, we won't have anything going on May 17th. Because for the first time, as I'm reading, the first time in Trump's family history, Trump will be going to, I guess, has asked to go to one of his children's graduations. I guess he hasn't gone to any of the other ones, but he's going to Barron's.
Right.
Before or after the Minnesota Republican Party's Lincoln Regan dinner.
Well, to look at it as a dad, you have children. So to look at it as a dad, you look at the other two and you're like, okay, I'm going to correct some mistakes on the third boy. You know what I mean? More of a chance with Barron, huh?
No. Look, the kid looks just like him. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's the difference.
Right.
Maybe he thought the other two looked like the mailman. I don't know. But hey, we now find out what Trump will do in his second term. He says he plans to send kill teams into Mexico to fight the war on drugs.
It's amazing.
I'm not making that up.
Well, at least at least he tied it to drugs and not just people trying to, walk to the border. He did tie it to drugs. So some people say, oh, okay, that sounds good. You got to stop drugs at any cost. Now we all know it's not going to work. But you know, he just has this amazing ability for the right or the wrong of it, or to continue to be in the headlines.
Yeah, no, the guy,
he does it.
He grabs the oxygen out of the room. I got to get your thoughts on Marjorie Three Names, who Major Marjorie Taylor Greene evidently backing down, and kind of softening her threats against Mike Johnson. The speaker is saying she's going to give him a little bit more time. He needs to demonstrate his commitment to conservatism, but she's going to give him the benefit of the doubt for a little bit.
Well, she wants several things. She wants the Hastert rule. Now, I was in the room when the, quote, Hastert rule was created. Hastert was Speaker of the House. And they created this rule. And when I say they, some of the right, because at that time, as you know, we had 50, what we would call, well, we were called squishes, but we had 50 pro-labor Republicans and 50 Republicans, 50. And I know that because they would sign each letter when we got mad about something, like when Bush tried to take away prevailing wage off of federal projects, you know. So those 50 were the moderates. Well, the conservatives got tired of the group of 50 winning on amendments, et cetera, that were really good amendments, you know, but they weren't conservative enough for them. So they created this Hastert rule. And when we would make certain amendments, you know, applicable to the floor of the House, we would get Democrat votes. Not all of them, Rick, but we would get a large portion of votes, all right, because they were centrist amendments. So they created the Hastert rule. You can't pass anything unless you pass it with the Republican majority. So under this infamous Hastert rule, which is not a piece of law in the House, it's not an official rule, but under the Hastert rule, you bring something to the floor that only Republicans can pass. You don't need Democrat votes. Well, in today's House, that's impossible. That's what Marjorie Taylor Three Names wants. She wants that. So, you know, I don't know what the speaker says to her on that, but I don't know how you do that. There will be nothing moving. Number two, she also had wanted, trying to remember, no, I can't remember the second thing she wanted. Do you remember what she wanted? I know the Hastert rule was one of them.
Yeah.
There was some other demand she had that was basically, you know, almost frivolous. So anyway.
Well, part of it was Johnson's commitment not to fund Ukraine. Part of it was defunding Jack Smith. Part of it was, you know, the advancing legislative priorities that were already supported by the majority of the majority, which is what you're talking about, the Hastert rule. So, you know, that's the whole Ukraine thing was kind of that.
I forgot about the Ukraine. Yeah, I forgot about that. Now, it's interesting. She wants him to commit not to do Ukraine money. He can pretty well commit to that before November, probably. All right. So I think it was her way of going in, and she went in with Massey and Green, other members of Congress, the other two that support her, and she's down to about 2 or 3, and she went into that meeting looking for a way out, even though she doesn't normally care. I think, Rick, she was looking for a way out, because if she brings up the motion, the speaker is going to get one pass on this. This I know for sure. One pass only from the Democrats, because the Democrat caucus is starting to rumble, saying, wait a minute, we're not going to continue to bail him out all the time. So he'll get one bailout. She knows that. So she loses. Then at some point in time, she may try to vacate the seat. Now, he can agree to anything almost with her because, number one, summer session, you know, they're out in August. There's not a whole lot left on the agenda. And number two, he's going to try, if the House remains Republican, to do away with the vacate rule, where one person can do that to the speaker. So he can kind of hem-haw around it. He does have the edge on her because he knows that Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, will hold to one vote to spare him. Now, there's another scenario that I have, because I saw it happen. Not for control of the House, but I saw it happen of people switching parties. Billy Tozan is the most famous one. 1995, we took control. I was part of that freshman class. Billy Tozan and a couple more members switched. One went independent, then Republican. They switched to the Republican Party. And by the way, when they did it, they didn't go to the minority leader Gephardt and say, "Hey, by the way, we're thinking of switching." No, they just did it, and it caught the Democrat side off guard. Now, it didn't make the difference because we had a bigger margin, but we still picked up 3 seats. And if this gets down to where it's a 1 or 2 vote difference, I'm just throwing this out here. Could Hakeem Jeffries get signals maybe from, say, 3 Republicans who say, "Hey, I want to switch"? And of course, Billy Tozan eventually was rewarded. And by the way, I was in the room when people said, "Billy Tozan, you can't make him chairman of Ways and Means, or you can't give him this, or you can't give him that." And they could, because he switched.
Right.
And he got out on the line for us. So I'm just throwing that out there. It's possible if 2 or 3 members on the Republican side switched, maybe they got a subcommittee chairmanship. I don't know. Maybe something happens. Maybe one of them got a chairmanship and they switched. That would make it very interesting. And the person who would cause that switch to happen immediately would be Marjorie Taylor. 3 names.
There you go. Because they've only got 1 vote majority right now. And Billy Tozan, you throw that name out. I haven't thought of him in a long time. Ever since he bailed, what was 2005 during the Bush years, to go take what was $1 million a year gig working for Big Pharma. That
yes.
Me again. I look at that as everything that's wrong with what goes on in Washington. What was that?
Correct.
But as
Correct.
always, Bob,
especially Big Pharma.
Yeah, crazy. As always, I appreciate the time, the insight. Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1863. That was the day that Division 1 of the Brotherhood of the Footboards was founded in Detroit, Michigan. By the next year, they had changed their name to the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers. In the early years of railroad transportation, the men who worked on the rails worked long hours under tough physical conditions. Any attempt to organize or strike was brutally crushed. The engineers had attempted to organize as early as 1855, but the effort had failed. Convinced the workers needed to join together, William D. Robinson, an engineer who worked out of Michigan, called a meeting. 19 men gathered at his house in Marshall, Michigan. The meeting laid the groundwork for forming a union. The next month, a dozen engineers met in Detroit and elected Robinson as the leader of their new organization. The Brotherhood set up its headquarters in Cleveland, Ohio. Over the summer, they began to organize more divisions. Soon, 10 locals were established across Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio. The next year, the Brotherhood held its first national convention in Indianapolis. The Brotherhood became one of the Big Four labor organizations of railroad workers, alongside the trainmen, firemen, and conductors. The engineers established labor banks and printed a journal, initiatives that helped build their strength. These early railroad brotherhoods were for the most part only open to white men to join as members. Working on the vital transportation lines that moved the nation's goods and people gave the Brotherhood leverage at the negotiation table. The Big Four won gains in working hours and conditions that helped to pave the way for unions in many other sectors of the economy. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So it's National Teacher Appreciation Week, the time where we thank our teachers for the hard work that they do, and I want to outreach to them. I know it's tough. I know the attacks are coming from every direction, but I want to thank a teacher. So if you see a teacher, by all means, thank them. Also, it's Public Service Recognition Week. So the folks who work in our public services, make sure that the functions of government are rolling along. By all means, thank them. And National Nurses Week. Thank our frontline heroes. Really, all of those folks, all, if you remember during the pandemic, all frontline heroes, all essential. So thank you for the work that you do. Now, it's interesting. I was watching some of these. Sometimes I do fall down the rabbit hole of watching these social media video things, the video crack. And I happened across, and I don't know who these three idiots were, but they were amazed at how much UPS workers make. And not in a good way. This is one of those things where they, can you believe? And my mind immediately went, well, not one of the three of you could actually do the job. So I would shut up on that vein. But it got me to thinking about, these so-called rich guys. And I assume all of them were investor types, because they were all, every time I see them, they're I made money, cheating people on rent or whatever it is. And it got me to thinking about, the job at UPS does pay well. It's hard work. It is stressful, high anxiety, high pressure, all that stuff, and physically demanding. It takes a massive toll on your body as well as your mind. But they make like a top rate, like $49 an hour, which is like $100,000 a year. And I got to thinking about, the reality of where we are. In my working lifetime, I remember when I started working, back in the late 80s, in the freight industry, we were making in today's dollars, in that $100,000 range. Had our wages kept up with inflation, from that point till now, we would be right there, because freight used to be the top of the Teamster scale. The LTL freight industry, which was 85% unionized at the time, was at the top. That was the gold standard of blue collar work in this country. It was one of those jobs at the top. And what's happened over the years, and again, this is thank you, Ronald Reagan. Thank you, Republican Party. Those jobs have been eroded away. In the name of competition, of course. In the name of deregulation, of course. And again, Carter had something to do with this. Teddy Kennedy had something to do with it back in the late 70s. But Reagan is when all of this stuff, the wheels fell off the truck, if you will. When they fires the Patco workers, it's the shot heard across the boardroom, and it is an all-out assault on working people. But understand, we were in decline already. We were beginning because corporate America had said, hey, we're not paying anymore. We're not going to pay good wages. As I've said before, 1973, all observers say that was the peak of the U.S. economy for working people. That's when inequality was at its narrowest. That's when the boss and the worker were as close as they've ever been in human history. And because of conservatism, because of pro-business policies, because of the assault on working people, we now are where we are. Where someone who has a good job, and look, that job at UPS is a good job. It's the kind of job you can support a family on with one income. It's the kind that my grandparents' generation, across a wide swath of the middle class, had. And this is the part that's remarkable to me. I listen to these three idiots, blather on, and as if this is some kind of some kind of heresy. How dare they make this kind of money? And you go, in my mind, all workers should be making that kind of wealth. And I remember someone telling me years ago that work doesn't create wealth anymore. My grandparents' generation, they could. They could work, that whole work hard, play by the rules, get ahead thing. They actually did get ahead from work. Now work just kind of keeps holding you back. And, what you used to be able to get defined benefit pensions, they destroyed, eviscerated, getting us to think, hey, we're going to all be millionaires because we're going to get these wonderful 401ks that they didn't fund. if you stop and think about it, the anger in the working class shouldn't be at each other, shouldn't be at people who go to different bathrooms, shouldn't be at any of that. Should be at the people at the very top. Should be at the wealth class of this country that not only did a bait and switch, but did armed robbery. So for me, I look at this and I go, when do we as a working class defend the jobs at UPS and say, hey, how do we get more of those? How do we get more industries to have that kind of power so that we can gain some of that wealth that our labor creates? That's the part that gets me. I'm always amazed at working people who don't seem to value themselves all that much. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Is your industry, has it kept up over the last 50 years? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program? Make sure you grab the podcast. As always, thanks so much for being here.
Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.